Wayne Scanlon here in the Ottawa Citizen, Ottawa Sun newsroom, joined by Ken Warren, one of our Senators beat writers. Ken, quite an eventful day in the life of one Michael Hoffman. Traded this morning by the Senators to the San Jose Sharks, essentially for Michael Bodker with some add-ons going either way. And then he promptly gets flipped to the Florida Panthers for three decent draft picks, a second, a fourth, and a fifth round pick. What do we make of all this?
What we make of this off the top from a Senator's perspective is they got rid of a headache. And the nightmare that was around the organization involved the cyberbullying scandal between Mike Hoffman's girlfriend and Erik Karlsson's wife, and that goes round and round, and at least for the time being, they've eliminated a little bit of that distraction. So that we're not surprised that he got traded. Now we can digest what they might have, the return for it. And there's lots of discussion about what they got and whether they got enough for Mike Hoffman.
And which return do you like better for him? The return that the Sharks got from Florida, and which is essentially draft picks, or getting Michael Bodker and a draft pick and a future, perhaps? Yeah,
I think when you analyze the whole three-way trade, it amounts essentially to a three-way trade, right? Mm-hmm. Because San Jose flipping. I think San Jose down the road is going to benefit the most out of this. I mean, you have to wait for those draft picks to turn into players. It might be, in the case of fourth or fifth round picks, that might be 3, 4, 5, even 6 years down the road. But there's a lot of players there, and in San Jose's case, they had the room to get rid of Mikhail Bodker because they have already a lot of players in the farm system who are ready to play. So I think San Jose did really well out of this.
Yeah, and they also dumped a bit of salary in
Exactly.
Michael Bodker, a guy that they were probably happy to get rid of in that respect. Erik Karlsson. That's a big question. Did this improve the Senators' chances of keeping Erik Karlsson?
Well, in one sense, like you said, they cleaned up the headache that was going on in the dissension between those two guys and their wives. But I think I look at it as the Karlsson situation a little bit of a bigger picture. I mean, long term, whether Karlsson stays here, and there have been discussions, is where does he see this organization going? I mean, he's about to sign an 8-year deal with someone, 7 or 8 years with someone. And if you look at the picture and you say he doesn't like the way that the Senators organization is going, he's not going to want to stay here. And if the Senators are not a competitive squad and for at least 2, 3, 4 years, I think that's more of the bigger scope for him. And if you look at the way this is going for the Senators and dumping bodies, I just don't see how a star player with only so many years to compete for the Stanley Cup would look at that picture and say, I want to stay around.
A bit of a dump in Mike Hoffman because the player that they really desperately wanted to get rid of. Erik Karlsson, that trade is obviously going to be a very different situation. Do you expect there'll be a bidding war here?
The Senators can only hope there is, right? I was looking at this morning and trying to figure, well, what's the precedent for a player of Erik Karlsson's talent to be traded? And there isn't one, because if you have star players traded, but they're typically traded back for star players. I don't see that scenario happening here in Ottawa. You're going to get players back. But Ottawa's case, they're going to have to turn to a developmental model. So it's 3 high draft picks, 4 high draft picks, 1 or 2 decent prospects that are already close to playing in the NHL. The return is going to be very big, or they have to be very big for Pierre Dorion. And you're right, if he gets a good offer in one place, he can use that as leverage for a possible another deal. But boy, I don't think there's any way the Senators can really win that trade, because at least for now, because you got to wait for these prospects to develop, and they may not develop the way a team hopes. So I think it's impossible for the Senators to win any kind of trade with Erik Karlsson. You just have to try to get the best possible deal. And the way it looks is the Senators will be leaning more towards prospects, players you don't have to pay right away necessarily, than bringing in star players now.
Clearly they need something decent in return, because you market hope, and they've got a lot of tickets to sell this summer.
And what they are short is a 2009 first-round draft pick, because they traded that pick away when they traded Kyle Turris away and got Matt Duchene back. So to me, that would be kind of a pivotal part of the package. You're going to get a lot more of that, more than that too. But I think that would be pivotal in any deal.
Pierre Dorion makes that deal. He's thinking that Hoffman is is off to the Western Conference And of course, he gets flipped around, and he stays in the East and the Atlantic Division, where they're going to see lots of them.
Yeah, that's not the scenario. I think, like you say, typically if you're trading away a star player, you want them as far away as possible, so you don't see them very often. Twice a year with the Western Conference team, and now it's going to be 4 or 5 times you're going to see him. Going to come back to Canadian Tire Center 2 or 3 times a year. I'm sure that's going to be a fun environment. We've seen it in the past when Danny Heatley comes back, or Alexei Yashin in the old days when they come back. You get these crazy games and crazy emotions in the building. But the two people right now who least likely like to see him are Craig Anderson and Mike Conn, because that release on his shot, Mike Hoffman's, is deadly. They've seen it enough in practice. Now they're going to see it in game action when Hoffman comes in.
By my count, there's 9 players that have moved off that roster, the roster that took the Pittsburgh Penguins to double overtime in Game 7 of the Western Conference Final merely 13 months ago. Is it? Can we call this a fire sale?
Yeah, fire sale, garage sale, yard sale. I mean, pick your term here, but absolutely. I mean, if we go back to that team that went to the Eastern Conference Final, 1 game from the final, it was a very experienced group, and that's the way Coach Guy Boucher wanted it. He was a guy who relied on his veterans, didn't lean on the kind of afraid to play the young guys, but experience over youth. That's flipped on its ear now. We're going to see next year, I don't know who we're going to see on the ice, but we're going to see a lot of younger players who are going to make mistakes. They're going to have to grow into better players, and they're cheaper. Let's face it, this organization's going cheap. They're trying to dump salary. Part of this deal as well with Hoffman was they're saving like $2.5 million each year in exchange for Bodker and Hoffman. So more and more deals. There's even some mention out there right now that maybe Zach Smith's possibility to be traded, and he has a little bit of a heavy contract, but it's not one you would think would be that burdensome. So this is going to be a crazy week to come. More salary being dumped out.
One of the questions that's coming up online, what if they're overreacting to this? Mike Hoffman and his girlfriend Monica, his fiance, I suppose, denying that they had any involvement in this harassment of Erik Karlsson and Melinda. What if we find out that he's completely off the hook and cleared of all charges, and Monica as well?
It's a good question, but I mean the scenario is now, like we just said, about Mike Hoffman's not a young player anymore, sort of heading towards the tail end or middle of his career. You're flipping it over. I mean, can this team afford to carry how many $5.5 million contracts? Again, this is what I mean. We shouldn't be completely shocked that this is happening, because we heard that in the town halls from Eugene Melnick. We heard it from Pierre Dorian. We're saying we've got to change directions here. It's a little bit of a surprise because Mike Hoffman wasn't originally seen on the radar for that. But this team is just not going to carry that many high-priced players. It's going to be very difficult for fans to. I mean, you're probably going to have Mark Stone. You're probably going to have Matt Duchene, Bobby Ryan. I don't think they could ever get rid of that contract. But after that, this team is going to be made up of a lot of younger, cheaper players.
And I guess the other issue is, Dorian, among other things, is trying to put out this tire fire, and it's been a tire fire for the last month or so, and he's trying to get rid of a distraction. But now this team is trying to, project some positive PR. How do they do that? Presumably out of this draft.
Well, I think you said, he's got to be able to hope, right? Now, how are you gonna if you trade Erik Karlsson here? You're gonna upset a base, and I mean our season ticket base, whatever we figure the season ticket base was last year, it's going to be a lot lower now. I mean, why are people going to come out and watch a team that has really? I mean, would they be competitive with the league? This is going to be about an experience and these guys growing. I think it's going to be very, very difficult in the present tense for people to get excited about winning. They might be able to get excited about, hey, this guy in 2 years, might be a good player. This guy in 3 years might be a good player. And how do you sell that in the immediate? I don't know. That's very difficult.
And I suppose the primary question heading into the draft, do you keep that 4th overall pick or do you move it and try to build something else?
I think you keep it. I think you get an opportunity to pick in the top 5. There's only so many ways to get that kind of talent, and especially if that player can come and be an impact player playing for. I'm going to get back to this once again. Cheap. I mean, entry-level contract players, they make less than $1 million, or just around $1 million. You're it's a bargain in the sense that you're going to get a guy playing in prime minutes without making the prime money, and we see it around the league. Even when you see it, Toronto with Austin Matthews, playing under his first contract. It's a way the NHL in some respects is you have to have the young talent that can play right away. So I would really be surprised if they traded that pick away.
Yeah, a question from reader Marlon Palmer: with Hoffman traded, what's next for Dorian over the next few days? Well, not much. Just got to deal with trading the greatest superstar the franchise has ever had, or at least think about trading him, because they can't offer a deal until July 1, but we know that they can talk, and he will have a very good idea this week whether or not Karlsson is willing to return.
That's one of those kind of weird, wink, wink, nudge, nudge things around the NHL. What's he going to accept? Well, we can't offer him anything, but you know what his ballpark value is in a contract. You probably have an idea, going into the trade deadline or going into the draft, what the offers are out there. Maybe there's another one comes in down the road here, but I think the Senators have a pretty good idea of what his value is in the marketplace and of what they're going to offer him. I don't think there's really, if it got to July 1st, what the surprise would be. So I think the chance, anyway, I think the chances of being traded this weekend are really, really big.
Yeah, and once that is done, and once that other shoe drops, what's the biggest priority? Is it getting that, getting that number 4 pick nailed down, or do you already start thinking about the 2019 draft, where they may be in position to sign Hughes or one of those top players in 2019, which is expected to be a better draft.
Well, and that's the thing about I think he's got to try to get out of this this weekend with that first rounder for next year as well, because they lost it to Colorado. So ideally, you want that to be a team that's actually not going to make the playoffs next year, because then you're in the lottery for it. Right. But then you think the team that's going to go all in on Karlsson probably is going all in thinking they can win the cup in the near future. So if that team is as successful as they think they are, they're going to be in the playoffs. So then it's a late first-round pick as opposed to an early first-round pick. But I think at this point, you get that first-round pick, and if things play out next year or whatever, maybe you can do another package and move up further to get a lottery pick. All these things. I mean, do you imagine the things going on in Pierre Dorian's head right now to try to this puzzle? All the balls in the air to try to. You're not just thinking, this weekend. You're thinking, okay, 2, 3, 4 years down the road to try to get this team into some sort of competitive thing, while also saving money, because that's a mandate here too. There's a lot going on. Not
to mention that his AGM Randy Lee is under suspension while they deal with the charges that came out of that incident in Buffalo. You and I have been with the franchise from the very beginning, 1992, when they first hit the ice. We've seen a lot. We saw the expansion years. We've seen some rebuilds. We've seen some legitimate Stanley Cup contenders. Fans, it's a very smart fan base, but how long will they tolerate a rebuild, and how long will it be before the Senators are competitive again?
Yeah, we hear the mindset in the community. The mindset in the community is that there has to be for a lot of fans to come back, it has to be a change, not on the ice, at the very top. And that means the owner. But the owner owns the team, and he's so far not been willing to sell. And I think that's when you might, if there's a change in ownership, then maybe some fans will come back and say, okay, there's some new life, and then that maybe ties into the new arena if they ever get that project going. To me, that's what a lot of fans are waiting for. So it's a vicious circle here, because if the owner spends less money on a rebuilding team, I just can't see people coming out. But if a new owner came in and spent money, then it might turn around and you'd have some new hope. But you said hope earlier, and the hope, where is it? Is it the hope in 2 or 3 or 4 years right now for young players who aren't even here in some cases?
It really is a mindset, isn't it? Because you could picture, perhaps new ownership, perhaps with Daniel Alfredsson coming back, starting to think about moving downtown, developing LeBreton Flats, having a brand new rink down there. Now you've got something to target, and you start to build a franchise that could be a decent team, much as they wanted a decent team, when they built the Palladium, the Corral Center, and all those other names it's had since then. But Wouldn't that be nice timing if they could kind of time a rebuild for that?
You know, there are models around the league. There's not many, but there are a few to say, hey, if you chop as much as you can and start over, then maybe you can get there in 3 or 4 years. You know, but boy, I mean, Vegas did it, but they had no contracts, no overhead to start with. But I think there is a model and mindset around the NHL too, is that hey, you've got to have a lot of young talent first of all, and then you build around the young talent. So maybe that's where they're going. But if you're a fan going out there, and I'm hearing 5,500, 6,000 season tickets next year, you know, you have nights out there with less than 10,000 people in that building.
Scary.
Next year.
You could put them in the rink downtown.
Yeah.
What about the fire sale? Is it over? Could we think about a Mark Stone leaving or a Matt Duchene?
Jeez.
I mean, once Karlsson is gone, do you put the brakes on the fire sale?
No, not necessarily. I think if Karlsson's traded, then if you know, it's that old saying, right? Wayne Gretzky gets traded, well, Erik Karlsson gets traded, well, then everybody else is you know, there's an opportunity for them to make a move. I mean, you'd think at some point you have to have some core NHL players. You have to have a leadership in that room. I mean, who's it going to be? I would think right now, if Karlsson gets traded, it's Mark Stone's the captain. But then those players too, those veteran players, they're in position to control what they do too. Do they look at this and say, well, why do we want to stay here? You know, it's sort of the same situation as Karlsson. It's a vicious circle that's going around here. I don't know where it stops, but you know, if Karlsson is traded, no, I think anybody could get traded.
Yeah, and Duchene left Colorado because he got sick of losing, and he comes to Ottawa. I mean, he's close to home, family home in Halliburton, and he loves that, and he keeps talking about that. But you wonder if he would want to sign for the long haul here, given the depth of this rebuild.
You know, just to backtrack a little bit, the other thing about trading Karlsson and bringing the players back, you know, if you're bringing back fairly star players, they have options in their contracts of where they get traded. If you're a star player and you have a team list of where you don't want to go, now why would you want to come to Ottawa? I mean, you're not going to win, at least in the short term. So I think that's a bit of a handicap to any potential deal bringing back, you know, a named player. That's going to be very difficult for Pierre Dorion.
Begs the question too, Ken, about the July 1 free agency period. You know, they're not known to go out and hit home runs on July 1 anyway, but would any kind of mid-range free agent want to come here?
Right. I think we know the answer to that, and it's no.
Unless it's for money, unless they offer a little more money, listen, I'll put up with losing because I'm at this point in my career, and maybe I can eke out another 2-3 years and get a good dollar for it.
Perhaps, but then you're playing for a certain, you know, then it's possible. They're going to have to put players on the ice, and you're going to lean on bringing in young guys like Colin White to play, and Thomas Chabot, of course, and maybe Alex Formanton gets a chance, Drake Batherson, and there's some excitement in that, I suppose, because you don't know how good these players can be. But again, it does take time for, other than the very, very elite, you know, guys coming out of the draft. They take some years to be at the level of an NHL.
There's a couple names involved today that we haven't talked about: Cody Donaghy and Julius Bergman. Can Bergman make the club next year, do you think?
You know, like he played in San Jose's farm system in San Jose. So who has seen a lot of them. He's a 22-year-old, scored 10 goals in the AHL, and good to bring that up because, you know, he was a former second-round pick, maybe progressing not quite as fast as he would like, but you know, we talked about the second-round pick that San Jose got from Florida and people say, well, you could have got a second-round pick. Well, Bergman's on a sort of a development curve. A 22-year-old is that much closer to the NHL than a second-round pick that you might get, you know, now, and that's actually a 2019 pick. So you're looking at maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years before that guy has a chance to play in the NHL. Whereas Bergman, you know, given what the Senators' defense might look, who knows? He might have a shot at playing for them next year.
And if not, would look pretty good in the Belleville lineup, and you can never have enough good young defensemen.
It's probably a guy they would consider to be called up anyway, right?
Exactly. Well, it's going to be an eventful week. You know, this may just be the start of just an unbelievable week.
Dominoes falling.
It may be the biggest week that we've seen in terms of movement. I'd have to go back to maybe the Jason Spezza 1991 draft, right?
Right, when
2001 draft. I'm sorry.
With Yashin.
With
Yashin going out, and then they actually got Zdeno Chara in that. So if you ever got a deal like that, if you could trade Alexei Yashin type player and get a franchise defenseman and a franchise center, which at the time Jason Spezza really did develop into, that was probably the greatest trade in Senators history.
And I guess some fans are wondering if they become the Buffalo Sabres. The Sabres are going to get Dahlin in this draft, and you'd have to think they're going to be better one of these years because we've been expecting them.
Right.
They've had high picks for a number of years and are still wallowing at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. And is that the Senators' position now? Theirs to lose.
I think so, and that just highlights not having that 2019 first round pick and an opportunity to get that high pick in what you said is going to be most likely a very, very good draft. So somehow they have to get that pick back.
Well, lots more to talk about, I'm sure, before this week is out. Ken, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.